after going away with some friends on July 4th. A lot of people are talking about this story because, according to the reports, he was a black dude and he was the only black dude with a few white dudes, and they all came back alive and he didn't. Clearly, since that time, we've learned via reporting on the part of some people, via an autopsy report and other things, that there are some conflicting facts that need to be brought to light. And I think that it's time to have a discussion about this from the vantage point of two completely different sides. One is a conservative, one is a liberal, one's a former police officer, one is a civil rights attorney and a legal mind. It's a lot to get into, make no mistake about it. It's going to be Officer Tatum on the right. It's going to be Charles F. Coleman Jr., civil rights attorney, on the left. And there's clearly a lot of things to get into, conflicting accounts. One friend claimed Wells chose to stay behind to talk to a girl. Wells' family strongly disputes this, stating they raised him to never separate from his group. There's a boat issue. Phone records and dispatch audio indicate the friend's boat suffered a mechanical failure around 4 p.m. as they left the island. When calling for a tow, the operator stated everyone on board was in good health. There's also the issue of Nolan Wells' body being found after being reported missing by his mother near midnight. A multi-agency search was launched. A National Park Service ranger found Wells' body floating face down on the northwestern tip of Horn Island on July 6th. Again, civil rights attorney Benjamin Crump is representing the family. And Officer Tatum, as in Brandon Tatum, traveled to Mississippi, interviewed one of the boys involved in the case, but according to him, he probably interviewed several of folks in attendance that July 4th day. So there's a lot of stuff to get into, and without further ado, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I know very little about this case other than what I've read and what I've seen on television. I've heard the reports implying one thing. Nevertheless, we're hearing other things come to light. So rather than speculate any longer, let's get to the bottom of it to the best that we can at this particular moment in time. With one autopsy having been done, another autopsy being performed, and evidence emanating from that that's been deemed incomplete, to say the least, there's a lot to get into. So without further ado, here we go. Get your ears perked up. Get your thought process circulating and percolating. It's time to get into it right now. My first guest is a civil rights attorney, a former federal prosecutor, and an MS Now legal analyst. He writes the What Matters Now newsletter on Beehive, and you can catch him on his podcast, The Brothers Briefing. He is joined by a former Arizona police officer turned conservative YouTube political commentator and host of the Officer Tatum podcast. Please welcome to the show Charles F. Coleman Jr. and, of course, Officer Brandon Tatum. Good afternoon, fellas. How y'all doing? How's everything?
Blessed.
I'm doing well, brother. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Charles Coleman Jr., let's start off with you. What can you tell us? I mean, the Nolan Wells case has been in the news for nearly 3 weeks now. For those who may not be aware of the case or have not kept up with the facts, just to recap, he was an 18-year-old college football player from Ocean Springs, Mississippi. On July 4th, he was friends traveled Horn Island, an uninhabited barrier island on Mississippi coast. Wells was the only black person on the boat. Wells was last seen around 3 p.m. His friends returned to the mainland without him. And as a result, a couple of days later, he was found dead. Coleman Jr., at this particular juncture, what's on your mind into this case? What's missing? What are your thoughts?
Well, Stephen A., we just saw the family release their independent autopsy results yesterday, which were conducted by Dr. Roger Mitchell, who is the president of the National Medical Association. And those results were inconclusive. They were able to establish that Nolan did not die by accident, that he did not die of natural causes, but at the same time that they were not able to establish that this was a homicide. In fact, that it was not a homicide. Now, one caveat to note is that the chief medical officer from the state of Mississippi, the sheriff's office, removed the throat from Nolan Wells' autopsy when their autopsy was conducted first. We have not heard the results of the state's autopsy, but we know that when Dr. Mitchell examined the body for the family, that the throat and other organs have been removed. So that your listeners understand, That's not abnormal. That's something that takes place normally during a case of an autopsy. So there's nothing that was wrong there. But at this point, Dr. Roger Mitchell, who did the independent autopsy from the family, has not been able to confirm any sense of foul play as of yet. That was undecided or undecisive. That does not mean that foul play may not have occurred. It just means that the autopsy that was conducted by the family did not show that conclusively. He saw some trauma to, some potential trauma to Nolan Wells' head. That was not something that he was able to explain as being the result of foul play. And we have yet to hear the state's autopsy and what they found and what their findings were. You may recall, and listeners may recall, that initially the sheriff's office said that they had no reason to suspect that foul play was afoot. And what I would say that this autopsy confirms from the family is that while that cannot be certainly confirmed, it still can't be ruled out. So finally, there are 60 witnesses that have been interviewed in the course of this investigation by the sheriff's office. There's likely going to be a presentation to the grand jury, and we don't know what the toxicology report will show from Nolan Wells because much of that is in the hands of the state. But as of right now, this is where things stand. And as a former prosecutor, I want to know what the state's autopsy is going to say and what are the witness accounts that they are going to put forward in the grand jury.
Officer Tatum, you personally interviewed, you traveled to Mississippi, from my understanding, to personally interview one of the young men who left the island without Nolan. Why should the public trust whatever account is coming from them right now, in your estimation, based on what you've learned? First things first, I shouldn't say that. First things first, what did you deduce from the conversation you had from one of the friends that was with Nolan Wells? What did you take away from that you'd like the public to know?
Well, Stephen A., I want to make sure this is clear. I actually spoke to all the boys that were being accused. I spoke to family members. I spoke to also their attorneys. It's just that the one young man had the, I wouldn't say courage, because others had reasons why they didn't want to come on the camera, but he was able to come on the camera, and I interviewed him. And I also interviewed another young man who was black, who was there, who had his own personal accounts of what happened. I'm not asking people to believe or not believe. I just wanted to give people the information. So nobody had heard from the young boys. Nobody had heard their accounts. And a lot of misinformation was put out there, some intentionally, some maybe not intentionally, but it was very detrimental and not conducive for the investigation into Nolan Wells' death. It was punitive. They came out and started with race. It had to be something nefarious because these boys are white for any other reason. So I wanted to go out and hear the full story. And what I deduced from the interview and talking to everybody is that these young boys had nothing to do with what ended up happening to Nolan Wells. And also they were best friends. I mean, these kids had so many pictures, so many text messages of them being closer to Nolan than any other friend group. And also one thing that shocked me was that this was an island, not secluded, not an island with 5 or 6 people on it. It was an island where there was thousands of people there, hundreds of boats, and also a lot of people could verify the statements that was made from some of these young men. So I really wish that we could have started at a point to say, what happened to Nolan Wells? Let's work together as a community. Let's talk to these young men, talk to other people, and let's find out what happened to Nolan instead of jumping the race.
Officer Tatum, how do you know that it was misinformation that was put out there? How did you come to the conclusion that something was misinformation? Explain that. Is it just according to their...
Now look at this.
Theme going around that the Wells in Nolan Wells' name is because his family is related to Ida B. Wells. There's been a big push. I put it on my social, big ups to Mark Thompson, who is in touch with Ida B. Wells when she was like 6 years old. So she had out of the box and so offensive. This is a grieving mother. He went on, of course, the podcast of our least favorite one of our sports.
I want them to turn that place into a parking lot.
How far is the water coming up, sir? Can you give me a description? Ankles? Hello?
Hey.
Yes, how far is the water coming up, sir?
It's coming up. We're just thinking. I don't know. Like we're going down.
All right, well, let's get you going. Membership number or phone number listed on the account, sir.
I don't know the phone number. It's either. I think it's. Try that.
All right.
I know we have a membership like guaranteed. I don't
All
have
right,
the tag on
unless you
here.
have a
They got
membership
ripped off.
number or anything, it's okay. I'll get you over to the captain. What's the best phone number to reach you at?
Reach me at 2.
All right, and is everybody on board in good health otherwise?
Yeah, everybody's
How
on
many?
board.
All right, do you need the United States Coast Guard?
What?
Do you need the United States Coast Guard?
No, we do not need that.
Okay, Frank, I want to go to you first because there's been a lot of speculation about that clip. There's been a lot of conspiracy theorizing about that clip and what people feel they hear in that clip. Do you hear anything unusual in that clip that would spur you as an FBI investigator to look further?
So first, I if you're in distress, in real distress, I do question whether your first call would be to the towing company or not. But I'll give them that because they might just be in a minor mechanical failure with the bilge pump. Oh, okay. The question how that we're sinking, and then the question comes, how far up is the water? And he thinks for a minute and he kind of dismisses that question and just says, I don't know. We're just sinking. And so I don't, he seems rather casual, quite frankly. And even, dare I say, so casual that perhaps his words are slurred. I don't know whether that's an accent that I'm not familiar with or whether he's somehow impaired. I'm not in a position to judge, but that's what I hear. Is everyone okay on board? Is everyone otherwise healthy? Yeah, we're fine. Do you need the Coast Guard? She's doing the right thing. How bad is this? No, we don't need that. So, I mean, can I glean a lot from this? No. Am I struck by the casualness and informality of it and not knowing how far up the water is? Yes. I don't know what that means.
And I will add to this, Frank, that if you keep going, I didn't want to play the full 9 minutes and belabor the full 9 minutes. He eventually says that they are in 31 feet of water. Yeah. He says they want a tow to Fort Bayou. He says there are about 7 people on board. At first, she says, how many children are on board? He says, there's nobody on board. Then she says, well, how many humans are on board? He says about 7. Then he explains the type of boat it is, a Triton 22 offshore, the flight hull. He says that's the kind of boat. He gives the degrees. He gives their exact location, what their sort of north degrees, et cetera, their geographic location, et cetera. But to your point, I will note that Warren, who is the other friend who gave the interview to Officer Brandon Tatum, said they were all drinking. So I think you can surmise that they're drinking because he sounds like he's drinking, right? So if you're sinking in 31 feet of water, does it strike you as odd that you wouldn't call the Coast Guard? Because that's deep water.
First, it strikes me as odd that, and again, I'm not an expert on Horn Island and where they were, leaving from, but it strikes me as odd that they got into 31 feet of water with this mechanical problem, and I'm just wondering how quickly they got into that kind of depth, not realizing the bilge pump wasn't working. And also, I would say if I were in 31 feet of water and the bilge pump's not working and the boat appears to be sinking, I'd probably have more of a sense of urgency in my voice. That's just my opinion.
Yeah. Dina, for you as well, do you hear anything unusual?
I was struck by that same thing, and I think I heard the longer part where she asks about the adults, and he definitely seems like he's slurred. He doesn't seem to completely be understanding what she's saying. Perhaps there's also background noise going on as well, but it's, to me, it does sound less like an urgent call than a chaotic call. They don't know what's happening. He doesn't even really know how many people are on the boat. When she said about 7, maybe they hadn't even counted. Was it that important to him to even know how many people? I always think, okay, if this goes to trial, like what would that appear like in front of a jury? And it doesn't appear like somebody who's being very cautious, right? Let's say, or clear-minded enough to even perhaps know where their friends are, how their friends are. There's definitely a casualness to it, and it seems like somebody who's not really completely coherent enough to be the captain of the ship.
Yeah. And Areva, what's happening now with this clip, it's all over TikTok, it's all over social media. People are stripping the audio, as we did, and big ups to John Baum, who's our amazing sound guy who we use on documentaries and stuff. He's a brilliant sound guy. But lots of people who are audio experts are stripping that video as well, Areva, and saying they think they hear people on that boat saying that Nolan is on the boat. I don't know if you can hear that. We've played it for most of our team. Some people hear it, some people don't. It's become a matter of controversy online. I don't know if you hear it, or do you hear anything that, in your view, indicates that there's a possibility that Nolan is on that boat?
Nothing, Joy. I've listened to it over and over again. In fact, I've had people send me versions of this clip that go so far as to say, Nolan is dead. We killed him. I mean, people have started just adding all kinds of things to this tape that are not audible. And I've been sending the clip that your team sent me saying, this is the news clip that's going out, people. So these clips that call Nolan's name or make reference to him are not what this local station released. So we now know the tape is being doctored with. People are, adding all kinds of things to it that aren't there. I think the most important thing about this tape for me, Joy, is we now have a clock. Something happened at 4 o'clock. A call came in from a boat and established a timeline. Now, that tape in and of itself does not tell us anything about Nolan. We don't know from that tape if Nolan is on that boat. We know there are multiple boats that were leaving Horn Island. We don't know if Nolan is on this boat or on another boat, but it is an important piece of the puzzle as we're trying to figure out what happened to Nolan. But this is not the dispositive tape. This is not the smoking gun. This is not telling us the whole story as people online would like for it to be. It's just one additional piece of evidence establishing a timeline of something happening. But what that something is doesn't relate to Nolan's death at this point. And that's what we have to just be clear as journalists, as responsible storytellers, that we're not adding to the controversial nature of what's happening online. And I just want to say my heart goes out to his family.
Yeah.
Imagine this coming out and now people saying that somebody's in the background saying, oh, Nolan is dead. That's just so insensitive to me. I'm so disturbed by what we as humans do with information like this in high profile cases like this.
Yeah, and I mean, and I will say, Frank, that, we sent this to, like I said, an expert, somebody that we trust that is not a hyperbolic person. It's not even in the news business. That is, we wanted to try to clean that audio if we could, because so many people were sending it, frankly, to me as well, with slowed down, with like sort of words on it and things like that. And, I wonder from your point of view as an investigator, is there technology that exists beyond what we had with our audio professional that can make background noise like what you hear, you can hear there's frantic stuff going on behind the caller. Like, that's very clear. Somebody behind the caller is yelling. I hear an F-bomb, I think, going off at some point. You hear a lot of yelling. But they could also just be panicking because there's water coming in the boat, right? That would scare the heck out of me as well. But is there technology that maybe the FBI has that could clean that audio and tell us exactly what the people in the back are saying?
So yes, though I caution folks not to think that there is this kind of Hollywood motion picture, a magic audio enhancement. It's less than you probably think, but more than many police departments and sheriff's departments would have access to. So, and a lot of this has to do with the state of the art, the decision to expend resources, and particularly the super sensitive resources that sometimes come from the national security classified side of the FBI. Not all the FBI's tools are utilized all the time. It depends on the severity of the case and whether or not they're willing to expose classified techniques and methods out of the FBI's sound engineering unit. But the short answer to the question is yes, greater than what we're seeing floating around the internet and social media now. And I too have heard multiple versions of this. I'll be honest with you, I can't, much like Ariva, I can't make a lot of sense out of these so-called strip downs and enhancements. But yes, all of that can be done at a very high level. And I don't know, here's the thing, I think what's causing a lot of this discussion and controversy is the lack of transparency.
Yeah.
And the question of how much the FBI is truly involved. Last time we met on your show, Joy, we talked about that issue and why isn't the FBI taking the lead in something that seemingly happened on federal property, which is Horn Island. Why is that? Why is it left to the sheriff's office? And I would love to see the FBI come out and say, we've got this. And they're not saying that. They could even come out and say, we know there's a lot of garbage going around right now, and we want you to know we're on the sound enhancements. We're on this or that. We're doing the following things. I wish they would say that. And by the way, I'll add, sadly, I wish I could trust whatever it is they were doing, and I'm not sure I can.
Yeah, and the other piece of it too is that, you know, Ariva, partly what's hanging over this too is that the local officials don't necessarily have the trust of much of the community. There was the case of a man named Deltravion Trey Reed, who was found hanging at Delta State University. The autopsy, the state sort of commission, the state facilities that did the autopsy there ruled that a suicide. There have been multiple of these cases that have been ruled suicides in Mississippi, so people don't have a lot of trust. So I think to Frank's point, I think this is one of those cases where people would like to look to the Fed as a more trustworthy actor than their local or state officials. And there's a feeling that none of the three are trustworthy.
Yeah, unfortunately, post-November 2024, I don't know if it's the feds either that would be trusted by our community or by the community with large. I just think there's so much distrust, particularly with the local officials in Mississippi, and they have earned that distrust. There is legitimate reasons why that family should not trust those local officials, but I'm not so certain that we live in a moment in time where we can trust the federal law enforcement agencies either. But I do agree with Frank. I think to the extent folks would feel somewhat better about this process, it would definitely be if we could hear from the FBI. And if some of those tools that Frank just identified could be used to enhance the audio on this tape, if that's possible, to let us know and to put to rest, finally, if there is anything, because all of our ears, I think we're all saying the same thing, we don't hear some of these enhancements that are going around on the internet. So we're just living in this period where it's very difficult to trust those that should be the most trustworthy. And this case is just exemplifies how much distrust exists in our institutions in this country, including our federal institutions, which used to be the safeguards, right? They were the safety rails for a state like Mississippi. And now we're saying we're not even sure we can trust them.
Absolutely. Let me play one more piece of sound. Now, this one you can hear. And what's on this one, I think, is raising, Dina, some additional questions. So this is later in the call. This is toward the back of the call, when the caller, who's very calm, talking to this frantic teenager, she then puts him on the phone with the person from CTOW, whose job it is to directly interact with the boat. So Jason, this is C3. Take a listen.
This is Captain Seth.
Hi, Captain Seth. This is Vicky from International. How you doing today?
Doing good. How are you?
Good, good. I apologize ahead of time. I really do. You're going to have a fee for service come up under...
Okay.
It sounds like a bunch of kids on board on Horn Island.